Finding a New York City apartment might be one of the most difficult things you ever do in your entire life. How crazy is that? Now, it might sound ridiculous that I'm saying that, but I'm saying it because it's the truth. Trust me, I've done it many times myself. And I'm also a residential real estate agent, so I literally do this for a living. So in this video, I'm going to share with you tips on how to find a New York City apartment, how to find it, how to be prepared once you do find it, and overall, just make this process a little bit easier for you. Because like I said, it's not easy in the slightest. As you probably know, or maybe don't know, a lot of people look for apartments here on StreetEasy. If you're not familiar with StreetEasy, it's very similar to Zillow, which exists anywhere in the country. But StreetEasy is really only used here in the local New York City area, but it's the same concept as Zillow. Zillow is also used here, but StreetEasy actually has the most accurate information out of all of them. But at this point, you're probably thinking, okay, Lauren, well, everyone knows about StreetEasy. This isn't helpful. And I get it. StreetEasy is definitely not going to be your best bet when you're having trouble finding an apartment because everybody is on that app. So when a new apartment comes on the market, everybody's getting the same notification that you are. So what other ways can you find an apartment here in New York City? I always recommend taking advantage of a local real estate agent. Now, I'm not just saying that because I am a real estate agent. I'm really not. Because in the past, before I was a real estate agent, I found apartments with a real estate agent and without one. And I do have to say, when you're not familiar with the area, or if you're familiar with the area, but because the market is so competitive, you're still having trouble, using a real estate agent is basically a workaround of all that. It's kind of just a shortcut just to make this process so much easier for you. Now, there are 3 other common ways that people find apartments here that are not StreetEasy. The first one is going to be this website called Apartment Guide. Now, I've used Apartment Guide a lot in the past, and it mostly specializes in buildings. So if you're looking for a small boutique walk-up apartment, you're most likely not going to find that in Apartment Guide. They do have them listed there every once in a while, but it's really for big rental buildings. So I want you to keep that in mind. So if you're looking at high-rises or looking at a neighborhood that has a lot of bigger apartment rental buildings, Apartment Guide is going to be a really good site for you to use. And I have to say, it's pretty updated. Landlords and leasing companies really stay on top of it. If you're looking for that type of apartment, Apartment Guide is going to be a really good place for you to go. Now, weirdly enough, a lot of people find apartments here through Facebook groups, and there are a lot of really, really good ones out there. Facebook groups can be used for 2 different things. They can be used for short-term sublets, so you're basically taking over someone's lease, or it can be used in a way where you're actually becoming the roommate in an empty room. That's probably the most common ways that people use Facebook groups here. It's New York City, so really anything goes, but that's where I see people really having the most success with Facebook groups, those 2 different scenarios. I've also used Facebook to find an apartment at times. And if you are looking at the short-term lease option, if you're looking for something where you can just like sublet and take over someone's lease, another website that I highly recommend is called Lease Break. Now, think of the name Lease Break. So it's literally people who cannot complete their lease. So these are very short-term, but New York City, where no one is committed to things, that might work for your scenario. So I want you to consider that as well. And I've also used that site both as a renter and as somebody who is offering a lease takeover as well. One of the biggest pieces of advice that I can give you is if you find an apartment or a room in an apartment that you are interested in and you want to move forward with, move forward immediately. Time is of the essence in New York City, and so many people lose great apartments because they're going back and forth trying to figure out, should I move there? Do I like this neighborhood? Do I like this apartment? Do I want to move to New York City? All these questions going on in their mind, and time will kill deals here. So try your hardest not to be indecisive when you're moving here, because it will definitely make this experience so much worse for you. The second piece of advice that I can give you is make sure that you are qualified. Now, qualifications for New York City apartments aren't exactly the easiest to achieve. So I'm going to read you a list that I put together of all the things that you may need to apply for an apartment here in New York City. All of these things do vary from building to building, landlord to landlord, management company to management company. So you may not need all of these things, but these are literally a list of things that I've put together for clients in the past of things that they've actually needed to provide. So I'm going to read it to you. I literally had to write down a list because I didn't want to forget anything in this video. So I wrote down a list to share with you. These are all the things that I've seen people ask for. Employment verification letter, including like job title, job functions, your actual salary, length of employment, so how long you've actually worked at the company. And then I've seen it being asked to be printed, signed, and on company letterhead, so it's official. Typically, you're looking at the 3 most recent, but it can also vary depending on what they ask for. Bank statements, typically 3 most recent bank statements. Sometimes you'll see 2. Federal tax return, so including a W-2 or a 1099 if you are an independent contractor. Copies of 2 forms of photo ID. Application fee, typically Typically, at the time of this video, you're looking at an application fee of around $20, but it can definitely vary from to $50 to $100 I've seen. So it really just depends on what they're asking for. They can ask for a recommendation letter from the previous landlords. That's always a really fun one because nobody wants to get a recommendation letter from the past landlord, but I actually do see it being asked for sometimes. The next is a summary of savings accounts or other assets that you may have, social security card, and also a proof of past rent payments. So actually literally showing that you paid your landlord or management company in some capacity. Okay, so what about income? Now, you might have heard of the 40 times number being thrown around in New York City real estate, and that's because typically landlords are asking for you to make 40 times the amount of the monthly rent annually. That might sound ridiculous to you, and honestly, if you compare it to other places in the world, it kind of is ridiculous, but it's the standard here. You might want to stop this video right now and start doing the math on exactly how much rent you can afford in New York City. And the number might surprise you because I remember when I first came to New York City, I was stunned at how much money they wanted me to make for an apartment that was kind of terrible, to be honest. It's crazy here. And that might leave you to the question, well, what do you do if you can't afford an apartment with that 40 times number? So there is something called a guarantor. And what a guarantor means in the form of leasing is that basically it's somebody that also signs with you and guarantees that you're going to pay the rent. And if you don't pay the rent, they're on the hook as well. This is very, very common here in New York City. Some landlords individually are not open to this. Some buildings are not open to this. So this is something that it is common here, but it might take away some apartments that you may be interested in just because if you have to go with this option, they might not allow this option. So it is something that I want you to keep in mind. However, because New York City apartments are so expensive, so many people do this. Now, if you are looking for an apartment with roommates, I want you to pay attention to this because you might be very, very qualified, but I want you to keep in mind that your roommates need to be qualified as well. So let's do a hypothetical scenario where there's 3 roommates involved. So you and 2 other people. Maybe you and 1 other roommate is really, really qualified and can actually afford the rent on your own, but then the 3rd roommate can't. Remember, if you guys are signing this lease all together, you guys are all on the hook no matter what. So even if this person isn't willing to pay or can't pay, then you guys are still on the hook for that other person. So I want you to kind of think of these arrangements. So I want you to think about this with roommates. Another common problem that I see with people who are looking for an apartment with roommates is that they might have all of their paperwork, all of their finances ready to go, but then the other roommate might not. And you all need to be ready to go and move forward as fast as possible when you find a place that you like. And you can't be waiting on someone else to really drag you down and affect the entire process. So these are all things to keep in mind. They don't call New York City the concrete jungle for no reason. It really is a jungle out there. So I hope this helped you figure out a couple different ways that people do find New York City apartments or approach the process. I do think that there are other ways to go about it that aren't street easy because, like I said in the beginning of this video, everyone is relying on street easy. So if you're having trouble competing with everybody else, it might be because you are relying solely on that site. So if you get a little bit more creative and look for other ways to find apartments, you may have more luck. So I would love to know in the comments, have you ever had a problem finding a New York City apartment, or are you having a problem right now? As always, I just love hearing from you guys.